Hello, just want to say hello to all of our attendees. We're going to start in approximately 2 minutes. We appreciate that you are here for today's town hall, talking about food disparities in communities of color. We have a really enriching conversation coming ahead, and so please bear with us. Good, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us today once again for our town hall on food disparities in communities of color. My name is Frank Joseph. I'm one of the co-organizers of this town hall. Later today, you'll be hearing from my other co-organizer, Selvina Brooks Powers, who is an amazing woman and doing great work in our community, leading a lot of efforts. This is a conversation that we had. We were talking about just, food insecurity right here in our community of Southeast Queens, and knowing that it is something that doesn't only impact Southeast Queens, but it also impacts other Black neighborhoods and other communities of color as well. So we said, what can we do? We thought of people from right here in our community who are, leading the charge to ensure that we are closing the gap. And we thought about the work that the city is doing as well. And so we decided that we would put something together in order to just share information with folks and have a dialogue on how do we address the food insecurities here. So I'm so happy that I can be here with you all. I just want to tell you a little bit about my agency, the New York City Commission on Human Rights, because we had a report on Black New Yorkers and their experience on racism here in New York City. And one of the issues that people raised was food insecurity. Food insecurity because of people who are on public assistance and the service, the quality of service that they said they received, and also food insecurity because of the options that people had, people of color, Black New Yorkers particularly, had in their neighborhoods and the lack thereof. And so when we start talking about food insecurity and food disparities, we need to understand that structural racism has a direct impact on food insecurity. In the United States, the USDA says in the United States that Black communities are twice as likely to be food insecure than white communities. Now, a lot of people will attribute this to the, wealth gap between white communities and Black communities. However, even when you remove the wealth gap, if all of those factors are removed, what we see is there is still food disparity in communities of color. And this is a direct relation to structural and institutional racism. So we have folks here who are going to talk about it, talk about how we troubleshoot this, how we close the gap, how do Black communities and communities of color continue to advocate for themselves, and how do we bring our allies on board and impact policy making, because this is at the root of it all. So we're going to have an enriching conversation. For those of you who are on Facebook Live, feel free to put your questions in the chat box, also on Zoom as well. Before I introduce my co-organizer and co-host, I want to also give a special shout out to Chantel Johnson, who's also with us working on, behind the scenes on all of the technology, and thank you for all of your assistance. Later on, you will find out who our panelists are, and you'll hear from them. But without further ado, I want to introduce to you a powerful Black woman, a leader, not just here in Southeast Queens, but has done work across the city, a community organizer, and someone that I'm happy to call my friend, Selvina Brooks Powers.
Thanks so much for that warm introduction, and just a public thank you to agreeing to help put this together. It's such an important discussion needed in our community. I recognize in that conversation how we share the same values when it comes to creating access for the community, especially around quality food and produce. And when you think about communities of color and communities that are largely consist of low-income residents, it's often a question of access. And in Rockaway in particular, where I reside, we often have conversations around limited access to quality healthcare, and this is another topic that's no different. So I don't want to take up too much time because we have some amazing panelists, excuse me, here this evening that are working in the community, doing the work in the community, who advocate around this issue and have powerful voices in here. And we wanted to create a platform to create this discussion publicly and to be able to educate the community around food insecurity and food justice, as well as to work with the community to develop a call to action and next steps so that we can see some tangible change. So before we get started, I want to set the table, no pun intended, that's my little joke, sorry, around this issue. So the Food Bank for New York recently released a report looking at the impact of food insecurity across the city since COVID. So prior to COVID, there was 1.5 million New Yorkers that were considered food insecure. Since then, since COVID has started, that number has been driven up by 20%. That increase in number that we see with just one of the many providers that we have here in New York City is as a result of growing unemployment rates, loss of wages, and to name a few of the varying reasons why. And as a result, you see much more families in need of this. Furthermore, because we've been sheltered in for the last few months, a lot of the volunteers at these food banks are often seniors who also had to shelter in for their own safety and well-being, creating a vacuum in a lot of the communities that have such a great need around access to fresh food. And as a result of that, a lot of pop-up, independent, community individuals have been filling that gap, which is amazing to show what the community can do when we really set our mind to it and really want to act on something. We don't necessarily need to wait on an agency. We come together and we do that. And so I'm so excited to see that. I've seen it across the city, but most particularly right here in Rockaway, in Southeast Queens, whether it's elected officials or community advocates. I just want to commend those folks and just also just recognize the work that's happening right here in our community. And that's just one step, and we just need to take it further. Not to mention stakeholders in the community such as Diana, who we'll hear from a little later, who is preparing to open up the first farmers market in Laurelton, which I'm super excited about. And I hope that everyone tuning in checks it out. So with that being said, I want to kick it off to the first round of questions, to the first round of questions so we can get everything started. But just to reiterate what Frank has already said, we want to make sure that we are able to answer your questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat box, whether you are accessing this Zoom through Zoom itself or through Facebook Live. You can just drop your questions there. We will try to answer as many questions as we can. And for those that we may not get to, we commit to getting the panelists to be able to answer it and finding a way to get that information out to you. So without further ado, I'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and then spend a minute or two talking about the work that you're doing in this space. So the first person I'm going to kick it to is going to be Diana Rose.
Thank you so much, Sylvina. Thank you, Frank, for considering me for this panel. It's truly, truly a great opportunity to meet with like-minded individuals in our community via virtually to discuss what is a really, really big problem regarding food insecurity. So my name is Diana Rose, and I am the CEO and founder of Jars of Delight, a zero-waste catering company based in Southeast Queens. And we provide zero waste catering to large and small corporations. That has been greatly affected due to COVID. So we've been able to pivot the company to Boxes of Delight and work closely with our elected officials, Senator Leroy Comrie, and provide meals for adults and seniors and our essential workers here in Southeast Queens. So that has been amazing. And I'm also the founder of the Laurelton Farmers Market, scheduled to launch this weekend, yes. And really excited about that because it has been a long time planning, but more so the reception has been overwhelmingly beautiful because we know there is definitely a lack of access to fresh quality produce, because fresh and quality, sometimes two different things. So we are really excited to be able to provide not just fresh produce to our community, but also a way to support our local businesses. So that's just a few of the things that I have been doing. I'm also a sustainability and community health expert, been doing this for over 10 years. So it's beautiful to see that my degree is not going to waste, and the money that I pay for that degree, that very expensive degree, is not going to waste, because now you see the conversation regarding food insecurity, sustainability, food justice really coming to the forefront of conversation. So 10 years ago, while people were absolutely doing the work, it wasn't mainstream. So this is a great opportunity to really just, educate our community and just to let everyone know that this is a solvable problem.
Thanks so much for that, Diana. Next, we'll hear from Quinn Carruthers Moreno, who works for the mayor's office at Food Czar that focuses on COVID-19. So, Quinn.
Hi. So since March, I was assigned to the COVID-19 Food Czar team that's headed by the Sanitation Commissioner, Catherine Garcia. I have spent about 5 years in the administration in various roles, and I'm really focused on the Get Food NYC program, which is providing free meals to folks who sign up via 311 or via our website. And you can get those meals as I say, absolutely free of charge, vegetarian, halal, kosher, and unregulated meals. We've delivered over 110 million meals since March. And we are also giving out food at the DOE locations. There's about 500 right now where you can go and get that food. Now, both of those programs do not have any requirements for eligibility. They do not require you to show any sort of identification. Basically all you need to do is to say that you need it. Besides that, I guess on the personal side, my graduate work is in food justice, especially in times of crisis. So my thesis is writing itself doing this kind of work.
Awesome. And next we're going to hear from Milan Taylor, who is with a local organization with a group of amazing youth that are they're moving mountains in the community. So Milan.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you, Sylvina and Frank, for having me. My name is Milan Taylor. I'm the executive director and founder of the Rockaway Youth Task Force. The Rockaway Youth Task Force, we're a youth-led advocacy organization based in the Rockaways. And the young people in our organization actually decide the work and issues that we take on. And one of the most profound issues within our community is that of food insecurity. So how the work has manifested itself has been through the creation of one of the city's largest youth-led urban farms, and that's right here in the Rockaways on Beach 58th Street. We have a weekly farm stand where we hire young folks from the community to operate the farm stand from opening to closing, harvesting the produce, and we just look forward to continuing serving the community.
Thanks so much, Maman. And I see that we've been joined by Pastor Cockfield, who is a pastor out here in Rockaway at Battalion Pentecostal, and he also has a community garden. So, Pastor, we ask that you do a brief introduction in terms of the work that you're doing in this space.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am sorry that of my tardiness in terms of being on this program, and I am so grateful to you, Savina and Frank, for having me on to share just a little bit about the program that we do. We do several programs, but just when concerning food. First of all, I'm a senior pastor of Battalion Pentecostal Assembly and have been serving the community for a little over 35 years. When it comes to food, we know that Rockaway is considered a food desert and has been for a number of years. What we also found out that coming to the Rockaways to establish a church is that there were so many people who were under the radar in terms of salaries, etc., and many things they was not able to achieve. As a pastor, I decided that I'm going to do something about it, and I started a community garden. And that community garden is now some almost 30 years old, which every year we've planted the garden. We have two lots, two lots 40 by 100, and we plant that garden, and we are a blessing to the community. We give away that produce with our pantry program, which we've been doing over the same amount of years, long before Sandy come, long before many people even think about a gardening program. We've been doing that and still doing that. We try to venture out on other things to make our gardening project even more, more accessible to everyone in the Rockaways. But like, everything you go to do, it costs money. And that's been an issue with just trying to use the church funds to do some of the things that we do. We do not get funding from anywhere and from anybody. We just do it as a church for our community. And we give out all the vegetables, all the fruits, all the herbs, whatever we would put down in the earth. And we have seen a great deal of people being blessed because of our efforts. And I will continue doing that for as long as I can. As a matter of fact, I'm looking for more land right now because there are so many projects that I have in mind that I would like to do to make that happen. And that's just a little bit about what we do at Battalion.
Thanks so much for that, Pastor. That was amazing to share. And I know firsthand that I've purchased produce from the Rockaway Youth Task Force garden, and I've tasted the strawberries from your garden, Pastor. And I mean, it's something that's crucially needed in our community, and breaking down these barriers is something that's important, and it's going to take all of the community partners working together to make that happen. So I'm going to kick the first question to you, Pastor, for the evening, and that is, why did you find it important as a faith leader to address food insecurity, and what exactly got you into it? I know you gave a bit of overview, but I wanted you to go a little bit more into detail.
So being involved in the pantry program and looking at what is given to the public, most times it's dry goods, canned goods, things that are not really um, nourishing for people. And coming from a country where I was a farmer myself, it prompted me to do something about what was being given to people. And that's what moved me, having two pieces of property sitting, nothing was doing with it. I decided that I'm going to farm that property and do something that would be helpful to the community. So once we plant that farm and we started reaping, as we're doing right now, we will now add what we have planted to that pantry bag, which will give people a more nourishing meal, and they will be able to have a better health. And that was the purpose why I went ahead and do that.
Thank you so very much for that, Pastor. Just listening to listening to you, Pastor Cockfield, and all of our panelists is just seeing the pillars of our community in action. Young people in action, faith leaders and faith community in action. Before I ask the next question, which will go to Diana, I just want to acknowledge some other pillars of our community that worked alongside Sylvina and I to make sure that this programming were possible. So I just want to acknowledge our co-sponsors for this evening. We have the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP. We have the Friends of Brookville Park. We have the Volunteers for Springfield Park. We have Allen NP&D. We have Community Church of the Nazarene in Far Rockaway. We have the Federated Blocks of Laurelton. We have Ocean Bay Community Development Corporation. And we have the Rockaway Youth Task Force. And we also have Battalion Pentecostal Assembly Incorporated. So thank you all to the pillars in our community who are making it happen and who see this issue as an important one. We know there are many other issues that you're also tackling. Diana, the fact is you bring a unique perspective as a person who has always pushed healthy eating. And also we know that you're starting the Laurelton Farmers Market this weekend. Hope everyone is there. Question for you. What led you to want to start the local farmers market, and what are some of the issues you see in our community around where you're starting the market, specifically to food insecurity?
Sure. So I live maybe 2 minutes driving distance from the Laurelton LIRR commuter parking lot, and every time I would pass, it was really like a God divine project. And I would just see the market driving by and I'm like, really? So every time I would drive by, this went on for months, and I just figured, where is the closest market to my house? And to be honest, it's like 5-6 miles. And I said, okay, well, if I contact the LIRR and I get favor from them and they're interested. And when I pitched it to them, they were so excited. And that made me think, wow, really? And then, I spoke to a few people in the community, and everyone was like, I've always wanted a farmer's market in our community. And so you just start to ask yourself, well, why not? And I think a lot of the times as a community, we tend to settle, and we tend to really not push the boundaries on the things that we know we need. So we know we need access to healthy and fresh produce, right? That's something that we know growing up from a child, eat your fruits and vegetables. But I think we just really get acclimated to our environment and not really wanting to push the boundaries and saying, okay, well, we want this, how do we make it happen? So I just reached out to a lot of our community leaders, a lot of our residents, and say, hey, would you like to have a farmer's market? And then we put out a survey, and unanimously, everyone said, yes, this would be amazing to have in our market and in our community. And just the idea of being able to go maybe 5-6 blocks from your house, purchase fresh fruits and vegetables, purchase fresh flowers, see your community, just that idea, it seems so grand, but in other communities, it happens all the time. It's like you can go to other communities and there's a farmer's market every mile. And so, it just really made me say, okay, well, our community wants this. This isn't a Diana initiative. This is something that our community truly wants. And again, the reception has been overwhelming. The support has been overwhelming. So that is what drove me to really say, okay, let's do the sleepless nights. Let's do the planning. Let's do the organizing, because all that takes work. and let's really, make this a reality in our community. So I really, don't take it for granted that the opening is this weekend. It's such, it's just such a vision that the whole community had. So this is a community market.
Well, that's really amazing and very inspiring. Thank you for that. Really appreciate the work that you're doing and those who are supporting it as well. I just want to remind our attendees, both on Zoom and on Facebook Live, if you're on Zoom, please use the question and answer box, ask some questions. We will be getting to your questions. If you're on Facebook Live, we're also monitoring the Facebook Live. Please as well, feel free to put your questions in the comment section. We will look at them and we will get to as many as possible. Now, Quinn, you work for the city, and our agencies have done a lot of work together, particularly now during the pandemic. So now more than ever, we are hearing people talking about the disparities that exist, right? COVID-19 has exposed so many disparities. What are some of the starkest findings, and what is currently being done from both an operational and a policy perspective to close the gap of food disparities that exist?
Yeah, that's a great question. The city is committed to addressing the problem of inadequate access to food. We've been supporting this for quite some time in various programs and policies. Specific to the Get Food NYC program, it was the commitment that access to food would not be an additional stressor during a pandemic. And we have noticed that there are certain areas that are utilizing those services much more. But additionally, the Task Force on Racial Equality and Inclusion has convened a working group specifically to focus on food. I think that they will be making some recommendations shortly, and then we will announce that to the public.
Thanks so much for that, Quinn. And, again, thank you for joining us this evening on this panel, because we really want to be able to have someone that is already looking at food policy and being able to hear firsthand from people in the community to be able to take that information back. Outreach is so important in working in these city agencies, which Frank knows firsthand. I know firsthand as someone who formerly worked for the city as well. This is why it's critically important to have people like Frank in these positions, whether it's deputy commissioner or what have you, where they can be able to ensure that our community voices are heard. So we thank you again for being a part of this evening's discussion, and we hope that you really take back what you're hearing to help shape whatever policies will come in the near future. So the next question is going to be for both Milan and Pastor Cockfield. We'll start with Milan first, but you both have community gardens in the community, and they operate respectively. And I just want to know, what are some of the things that each of your organizations do to promote quality food, access to quality food, and how are you leveraging, Milan, in your case, the youth to be able to educate the community and provide access? And for Pastor Cockfield, how do you leverage your congregational members to do so as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks, Sylvina. In our case, the entire farm, the entire community garden is run and operated entirely by young people. And when young people have an invested interest in projects, they take ownership over them. So all the ideas come from our young people. The structures that are built in the farm, our young people built them. So they take a great pride in seeing their produce go from little tiny seeds all the way to ready to harvest fruits and vegetables. So I just really think it comes down to giving folks autonomy over their spaces and creating that sense of pride, creating that sense of community that a lot of folks really want to see within the community.
Okay. What I would like to bring to the forefront here when it comes to leveraging, especially our congregation. Uh, for us, we have quite a few people from coming out of the West Indies, of which farming is part and parcel of what they're accustomed to. They like to know that when they're ready to eat, ready to cook, they go to the backyard and they harvest their food and they bring it in the house and, of course, cook fresh meals. Now, for us, many times for us to get fresh meals, if we don't do that, the meals that we are getting or the food that we will get from the supermarket, sometimes it's 2 weeks before we actually, from the harvest time to the time that it gets to our table is 2 weeks, which means that it lost a lot of its nutrients. So our congregants, them understanding health, of which something I do on a regular basis every month. We talk a little bit about different aspects of the body and how healthy you should be, etc. So that brings awareness, and we leverage the importance of them coming and being a part of the pantry program and also the gardening program. The problem we have is a big problem, and the problem we have is space. We need so much more land space to do what we want to do because of course, the vastness of the vision, to not only do just a gardening program, but to do so much more. Over the last 3 or 4 years, I had a few beehives where I was also providing honey. And I can go on and say so many things that for this vision, it's big. But in order to make it a reality, we need land space, we need property, we need a place available to make that a reality.
Thanks for sharing that, because you dropped a gem right there that I want to make sure I underscore for the community. This is something actually that Milan and I spoke about, I think it was about a week ago, Milan, in terms of the nutritional value on produce, in terms of the time from when it's harvested to when it gets to the table. And a lot of times when these produce items get into our grocery stores, it's been 2 weeks or more. And when you get them and you bring them home, sometimes you notice they just like look all like old, and they're starting to rot and things like that. They've lost its nutritional value, and it's just been too long. And it's not really intended for that. And so yes, I'm glad you just dropped that gem. That's something to underscore also for the community, so that we are more educated in terms of the food that we're taking in, understand what exists in our community, and be able to get these produce items from, whether it's going to be a farmer's market or a farm stand or a local church, what have you. We want to make sure that we're promoting healthy lifestyles, because in communities of color, we're often plagued with large amounts of chronic disease. And and similar to Pastor Cockfield, I'm of Jamaican heritage, and I understand that culture in terms of growing what you're going to eat and using good food to be the best medicine for your body. And so it's super important to understand that. And that's going to push me to the next question. So some of our partners have also submitted questions. So one of which was submitted by the Ocean Bay CDC. I wanted to make sure that I asked this question, and it's going to be directed to both Quinn and Milan. So community gardens are a great way to access healthy food options and gain education on fresh produce and its benefits, similar to what we just mentioned a few moments ago. So what can we do to create, using under public areas, to turn those into farms? I know I've heard Pastor Cockfield talking about access to more land, but what can we do from a policy perspective? Because this is some of the areas that, Quinn, you've been working on, and Milan, I know you have also been working on in that space as well. So what can we create by using public areas without necessarily turning it into a farm though, but that we can leverage to have access to this quality produce, better foods? So I'll go to Quinn first, and then Milan, you can pick up and answer after.
Sure. One of the greatest resources for folks who are in that space is actually to register themselves with the small business services that it's a mayor's office that's specifically dedicated to small businesses as an MWBE. That's a minority or women business enterprise. There are lots of farmers and growers markets that are in touch with that agency. There are a lot of resources for them on how they can apply to use public space and things like that. You know, a resource that I can give personally is that we have a bi-weekly call with food advocates and nonprofits, you know, with the Foods Our team, so that we can give updates, but there's also an open Q&A where we can take questions from folks, and I can drop my email in the chat and it can be shared with folks. And if you need help getting access to somebody at SBS, I can help them with those resources.
Thanks so much, and thanks for providing that information. Milan?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it really comes down to reimagining and revisioning. Let's use the Rockaways, for instance. We have some of the highest concentration of public housing within Queens. How were we using the land within public housing? There's tons of grassy spaces that can be converted into growing spaces. We also have 81 acres of undeveloped land, Arverne East. There has to be space dedicated so that the community can grow. I mean, when we think about what does land use access really mean, that's a question for our elected officials and policymakers in terms of values and what is really important to them. For instance, HPD. The fact that right now the city has a hold on new community gardens being built within HPD land. Yes, we understand the importance of affordable housing, but also the importance of having access to fresh, free produce is also important. So I think that's a really tough question to answer. And it's like, what do we value? What are our truths? And I think that's something that, especially in wake of COVID, the city's really going to have to prioritize, because it was Black and brown communities that were impacted the most. And there's a direct correlation between health disparities and the just how hard the virus hit our communities. So I just think it really comes to reimagining and revisioning.
Well, thank you for that, Milan. And I'm glad that you started talking about the correlations, because we cannot, one does not exist without the other. The, you know, poor access to healthcare, when we start talking about Black maternal mortality, you know, when we start talking about, you know, just generally the access to healthcare, when we start talking about income, economics, access to affordable housing and affordable home ownership, and food access. All of these are interwoven. And as we said at the top of the program, they are because of institutional and structural racism that does manifest itself. The United States Department of Agriculture, or USDA, says that over 21%, almost 22%, nearly 22% of Black Americans, of African Americans, you know, unfortunately, do not have access to quality food sources. 18% of that for, you know, our Latinx, brothers and sisters. When you look at the United States average, the United States average hovers around 12%. Sometimes it goes a little under, sometimes it goes a little over. So that's so very interesting. And, you know, my next question is for Quinn, and I want to acknowledge, I did see Quinn taking notes when all of our panelists who are community leaders were speaking, taking notes. So Quinn, you know, we appreciate you being here and taking those notes. And we'll also hold your feet to the fire because we're friendly but we are, one thing that we are is people who hold folks accountable. So we look forward to partnering with you in this way, to be honest as well. But as we're talking about the correlations, one thing that we know is this, right? Earlier we said, we started talking about economics, and we said that because of the economics, because, you know, white communities make more than communities of color, we know that also impacts, you know, the food disparities that are there. But research shows that even when you remove those, you know, factors, there's still a disparity. By removing those factors, if we were on equal footing on an economic standpoint, Black and brown communities would still have more food disparities than white communities, right? But the reality is this: white communities make 13 times more than Black communities. White communities also make, I believe it's 10 times more than Latinx communities, right? So now we need to talk about the economics. When we're looking at areas with low income residents, the truth is grocery stores do not sell the best produce. And oftentimes those communities, which consist of low income individuals, also lack healthcare access. And there are a lot of underlying health conditions, things that Milan spoke about. So what steps are being taken to reverse or address head on these barriers? And I know you spoke about the, you know, racial equity task force and that they're working on recommendations, but beyond those recommendations that we're waiting on, what are things that are happening right now? What are the steps?
Sure. I was in a really great meeting today where some of the large free produce distributors, the food banks, City Harvest, Met Council, had compiled some data on you know, places that were excessively hit by COVID, disproportionately affected by COVID, and then where there is farmers market and emergency feeding organizations operating in that same space. And not only that, what their capacity would be to increase if we could connect them to fresh produce that we're sourcing as local as possible. And so there is a, you know, there's a work stream within the Food Czar team that is trying to figure out how we can do this with emergency food. I wouldn't say that I am knowledgeable enough about what we're doing in the sense of, you know, what would essentially be regulating private businesses to not move out of communities of color and lower income communities, which we've seen over the last 60 years, this sort of shift. You know, it makes more sense to put a Key Foods in a high income neighborhood than a Key Foods in a low income neighborhood, and without forcing a private entity to not make that decision. You know, but it's definitely something on our mind. And so we do want to support. We have another work stream that's focusing on the farmers markets. We're hoping to get approval to assist to open more farmers markets, especially in those harder hit communities. And that's right. So we are also helping in the direction of the 25 million that we got from the city council to some of these food banks and pantries. But we are directing them and assisting them in directing most of that to the harder hit communities. And not only that, but to these sort of what we've called a post-COVID food pantries and food banks, which are, you know, sometimes faith-based organizations that have turned themselves into food distribution networks. You know, maybe they're not registered with HRA as a food bank, but they're essentially operating as one. So offering resources to them and sort of shaping policy that keeps those actors in mind and is not just focusing on, you know, the larger Met Council, City Harvest kind of organizations, but understanding that in some of these harder hit communities, it could be something that was running formerly out of a small shop front, you know, or people have converted their businesses into a different model where they're distributing food to their neighbors, and thinking about how we can empower them there.
Thank you so very much for that, Quinn. Definitely very, very informative, and we appreciate you just really breaking that down
Yeah,
for us all.
I was hoping that I'd have the report from the Racial Equity Inclusion Task Force. It's in the process of being finalized. So I think within the next couple of weeks, those recommendations will be made public.
Well, once it's finalized or right before it goes public, please flag that for Sylvina and I, because we'd like to make sure that we share it with the panelists, share it with our co-sponsors so that we can distribute it to the community members as well.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So Diana, I have a question for you. And after this question to Diana, I just want to also let our panelists know and our attendees that we will then allow, because right now I don't see any questions that the panelists, that the attendees, both on Facebook Live or on the Zoom have asked, but if there are questions, we'll go to them. However, before we go to those questions in the chat box, we're going to allow the panelists to ask each other questions, or if there are some things that you think weren't addressed that you want to make sure that we speak on while we're here and we have the attention of so many people. So Diana, we're talking about this weekend again because we're so excited. As you prepare to open the Laurelton Farmers Market this Saturday, can you share what the community can expect to see and why this is important? Like people want to come out there. I'm coming out there. I'm coming with the family. What are we going to see?
Yeah, we're socially distant.
Yes.
Let's throw that out there. But yeah, you can absolutely expect to meet your local businesses apart from our farm vendors. And I'm just going to be honest, a lot of our farm vendors, unfortunately, due to Hurricane Isis, has suffered tremendous loss of produce. I'm talking about hundreds of pounds, and Milan, maybe you can attest to that as well. So, you know, opening weekend, we will not have as much fresh fruits and produce as we intended, but that is nature, and you know, nature does what nature does. So, so charge it to nature and not Diana. But you can definitely expect to see your local businesses. So we have, I can drop some names if I can. We have Sassy Sweet Vegan Treats. We have a fresh seafood vendor there. We're gonna have fresh cut flowers from Orchids Gifts. And these are all local businesses in our community. And I feel like it is so important, as much as, yes, we hone in the message on access, and not just access, because that term is being used over and over as the year goes on with COVID. Not just access, because to be honest, we have access to food, but we need access to quality food, right? We need access to, as you can say, farm to table food. And again, yes, because there is a direct correlation, and the data shows it, between chronic and communicable diseases to diet. We need that. So we don't just need access to food. And that is why, and I'm going to plug the Black Resource Network. And they're doing an amazing job. Every week they go out and they host a weekly pop-up pantry. And the vision was no processed foods, right? No canned foods, no non-perishables, because we need access to healthy, fresh produce with the protein still intact, not denatured, because that is what helps our bodies to stay healthy. So you can expect to see our community partners. We're going to have professional services there. We're going to have, if you have a business and you want to vend, but you're not at the place, we're going to have services there that can help you get to the place. And we do have a goal. One of our top 3 goals is that all of our vendors become MWBE certified. That is a major goal of the market, because we understand how that lends itself to accessing contracts and being able to not just provide access to healthy, fresh food, but access to capital for our community, because we need that too. So you can come out and you're going to see I want to use the word cornucopia of different businesses and services. And we're just so excited to receive everybody. But please remember, come out with your mask, come out ready to be socially distant. We're going to love each other from afar. We're going to do this thing right. But this market is going to be the standard for our community regarding farmers markets and access to healthy and fresh produce and supporting our local businesses.
Well, that is so awesome. I'm so excited, and I can't wait to be there. And you used one of my favorite words, cornucopia. So that's cool too. I want to make sure, as we go to the next portion, I want to make sure that Pastor Cockfield and Milan also have an opportunity to talk about their farm stand and markets as well. And also just want to open the floor if our panelists have any questions for each other, because there's so much knowledge here. And I want us to be able to tap into that in this moment, and also share anything that you feel that perhaps we have not yet addressed. We want to open it up for the panelists to really have that free flow right now before we go into the chat box.
Yes, I actually have a question for Quinn. A lot of community gardeners, a lot of advocates throughout the city have raised great concern about the green thumb license and how restrictive it is in terms of giving community gardeners and urban farmers within the city the space to experiment, the space to truly bring our visions to reality. Has there been any conversation within the Food Czar's office about working with Green Thumb and Parks to amend the license agreement?
I have not been part of those conversations, but I wrote it down, and I'll definitely take it to them to see what they're doing. In my personal life, however, I have gotten questions from a lot of the mutual aid groups that are doing the community fridges, and their desire to use some sort of land for compost, because just by nature of them being refrigerators, they're going to have some waste, and they want to make sure that that waste is going into a compost pile. So, you know, on the personal side, not in my city capacity, I am trying to figure out how to connect some of those dots there.
Okay.
Sorry, really quickly, Quinn, with those dots, we encourage you to use the brains of those who are on this panel today, because they are some of the forward-facing thought leaders around this subject area in our community, not to mention a number of other people in the community that may be viewing right now live streaming, and we hope that they will use your email and reach out to you as well, just to make sure that they are connected with you as well. Sorry,
Yeah,
Pat.
and even if I can just be a conduit to SBS or to Parks, you know, you've got a City Hall email address, and I'll make sure it gets to the right people.
So I have a question for Quinn also. My question to you, sir, is how can we be able to leverage property land? Because part of what I understand is that every community have land set aside for not-for-profit organizations. Where those properties are and how can we leverage that property? That's question number one. Question number two is, are there any aspect of funding available so that we can do more than what we are doing? I am really working on 2 pieces of property. In the whole property is 80 by 100, but I can do so much more. Not only that, because my vision is really big, I would like to know that I can have property. I mean, what we saw and heard here today from Diana and what she's doing, that's part of what my vision is, but even much bigger than that. And why I'm saying this is because I think too long, there's so much bureaucracy that prevents us from doing these kind of things, which is very, very important to the community. If we, especially, let's say the Rockaway and Peninsula, 11 miles long, if we can have the kind of land we need, we can supply this whole peninsula with fresh vegetables and fruit. I mean, not maybe the type of fruit, all the fruit that you would like, but at least some aspect of it. And this is something that I would really like to find out, how can we get that going? I had too many people come alongside me and say to me, oh, you know, you're going to be the footman and we're going to work on getting the grants. And I've went through 4 of them already, different people. And I understand they get the money, but we never see them again. So I'm tired being exploited. And that's why I'm asking if the city does not have ways of how we can access what we are doing. First of all, not just to anyone, but people who have track record, like myself, for over 30 years doing this every year and coming back again and still doing the best I can when I can do so much more.
Yeah, thank you, Pastor, for that. I'm curious myself. I don't know the answer for you. But I do know in my experience, I'm on my community board and know that we often get a lot of inquiries on, you know, unused land and who owns it. And I think it's because there are so many agencies that own all these different pieces of land, whether it's HPD or DOE, DOT. So it might be a different answer for any of those, but I'm going to take the note down because I want to get an answer back to you on how underutilized land that is owned by the city could possibly convert it into a farm. And similarly with funding, the question on funding, I would say that probably SBS is your best connection there. And Commissioner Doris or Janelle Doris, you know, used to be ahead of MWBE, is now onto full SBS commissioner. So he has, you know, places like your farm in mind. And I think that SBS might have an answer there on how you can get some additional funding.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Awesome.
I also have another question, sorry, for
Go ahead,
Diana,
Go ahead, Pastor.
if you don't mind. Diana, where is your vendors coming from? And what are they bringing to actually be sold?
Absolutely. So are you talking specifically our food, fresh produce vendors, Pastor?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Yes, so we're working with a garden, a community garden in Brooklyn. Right now, because it is late in the market season, and because of due to COVID and whether it's layoff, we have had a very difficult time. And that is one of the topics that I'm also very interested in bringing up regarding BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, having ownership of land and being able to produce and represent at farmers markets. And I've had a hill and struggle, I don't know if that's a real term, but to get access to vendors. So Pastor, you are definitely welcome to share our space in Laurelton if you have any produce that you are willing to sell. But so far we do have 2 Brooklyn community gardens that will be selling seasonal produce, Swiss chard, kale. So we do have some fruits and vegetables. So we'll get a final count by Friday. Again, because of Hurricane Isis, it's been, I'm getting calls that a lot of the produce has been either scorched or has just been destroyed because of the hurricane. But Pastor, it's an open invitation. Please let us know if you're willing to come and sell your delicious produce. Want to try those strawberries? So you are definitely welcome to come along and join us as the vendor family in the Laurelton Farmers Market. And I know we have to go, time's going, but I do, Sylvina, if it's okay, have one quick question for Quinn, because he is the man of the hour. So Quinn, there was recently an RFP for meal prep and delivery for seniors for the city. Our MWBEs from Queens, like myself and many other organizations, being given special consideration, because the reality is Queens has been one of the hardest hit by COVID in the entire country. Like let's you know, that's a real statistics. We have been one of the hardest hitting. So our MWBEs that provide meals, or restaurants, food establishments, are they being considered for this RFP that just went out maybe 2 weeks ago?
Absolutely, they are. In fact, we did even extend it, because we extended it's closed now, but at the time we extended it so that we could encourage more MWBEs to apply. And I think even before we were doing that, I think I saw a statistic that just the emergency food contracts that we sort of gobbled up right at the beginning, as we just needed to get up to capacity to get up to 1 million meals a day delivered. It just without even any preferential treatment or anything like that, or special consideration, we have, I think, like 45% of our vendors were MWB, which was really cool. And I thought that was really great. So yes, that senior feeding solicitation, we are going to try and hit our goals, you know, as we have guidelines on what percentage of business we're doing with MWBE.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
That was a great question. I'm glad you plugged that in for the MWBs, especially local ones. And I always say that's a critical issue in terms of having diversity within diversity, as is often said, and also making sure that we have businesses from right here in our own community getting these opportunities firsthand to work in our community so that they don't have to go far out into another borough to get things done is always ideal. And so where policy can, and I know the Small Business Service Agency is great with their MWB program, but any way to continue to enhance it, especially around this space, would definitely be a win for the community. So Quinn, as you can tell, we are going to be bringing that email out. So right now we are at 7:04. And before we give everyone a final opportunity to give final remarks, I want to first check in with Chantel to see if there's any questions on the Facebook side. I know there was a number of questions in the chat box, some of which have been answered by the panelists as we've been talking throughout. But what I will do after Chantel reads that off, Chantel, if you don't mind reading off the ones in the Zoom chat with the response, just so that folks who may not be able to see that know what was asked and how it was answered.
Okay, no problem, Sylvina. So first thing you asked was for the Facebook. There are no questions in the Facebook. And so just give me a second here. I'm gonna go scroll back up and just see what we have here in the panelists in the chat. So one question was about the location of the farmers market and for the upcoming farmers market. And so that was answered. It's in the Laurelton, Long Island Railroad commuter parking lot. It's open on this weekend, this Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 2 p.m. And then it will continue every weekend until October 31st. Let me just go on down. There's a lot of thank yous. A lot of stuff saying this is a vital topic. Thank you for hosting this. Thank you so much. Thank you all for coming. And no, Quinn, if you want to repeat your email address again so we have that, that'd be great.
Sure. Q Carruthers, so that's QCARUTHERS at cityhall.nyc.gov. And if anybody wants to put that on the Facebook Live, I'm happy for it to be shared there as well.
I will share that right after this. Thank you so much, Quinn.
Yep.
So another thank you to everyone, the panelists, especially for your indispensable leadership. This is a critical time in our community. We applaud you for your efforts for organizing us to discuss such an important policy matter. All right, so let's move on. Here's a question. Might there be an opportunity or thought given to deepen the connection with some of our upstate farms who are eagerly looking for new market opportunities, which would expedite our access to fresh produce? And so that was answered. Yes, let's explore more ways that we can all make this kind of connection a reality.
I can say that there is a city effort, but I will be able to share more about that once it's announced, but definitely trying to engage upstate farms as well as we're in touch with the Long Island Farmers Bureau.
Excellent, okay. Thank you so much for that, Quinn. Another thing here, we have the Rockaway Youth Task Force Farm Stand is open every Saturday from 10 to 3 p.m. The location is 310 Beach, 58th Street, off of Beach Channel Drive. Okay. Okay, there's another question. Have we tried, and this is to Milan, have we tried park departments where there are open spaces for community gardens and we were told that we cannot plant in parklands because it is contaminated with dog things?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, there are so many issues when it comes to Parks Department and granting community groups access. Quite frankly, a lot of the things that we hear from parks just sounds like excuses, and there's no real effort to do the work. And that's where I think our elected officials, where heads of agencies come in to advocate on behalf of the residents so that we can access these lands.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so we have a few more. Okay, so this one is from Danielle. She says, I'm a teacher at the Institute of Health Professions at Kilbride Heights. We are doing indoor hydroponic farming in my classroom using a large grow rack and tower gardens throughout the school year. We are interested in partnering with the community to bring our produce, mainly herbs and leafy greens, to those in need. Please feel free to reach out. There's an email address, DDUBNO Hammer, HAMMER, at ihpch.org. Or you can follow them on Instagram, which is greenscience_IHPCH. Okay. All right, and that's it.
So thank you for those wonderful questions. But before we let everyone go, it doesn't stop here. We know there's been a number of these spaces where great conversation happens, but again, we as community members have responsibility as well. There is an active role for us each to play. And I am a numbers person, and I always think when we can back things up with data, how we think, what we'd like to see, backing it up with data is how we are able to move policy and legislation in the direction that is beneficial to the community. So we're gonna set a goal that everyone who is viewing this, we are going to drop in both the chat on Facebook and the chat on Zoom, a link with a very short survey. I think it's about 5 to 6 questions on it. And we're gonna ask that you take the survey, but then that you commit to getting 10 of your family members or friends to also complete that survey. If we get 100 people to do 10 of each of those surveys, we will have 1,000, which would be a pretty significant number to then compile. And I know that Diana has been doing work around this space for quite some time, wanting to generate a report that we can then bring to local elected officials and city agencies to have a conversation to be able to support what we're saying. We know what we are faced with in our communities in terms of lack of access. We understand what chronic illnesses we have that have a correlation to this. And so we have a role to play, and we control what we'd like to see in our communities. And by doing that, we have to act. And this is how we see that happening. This is the call to action. So for those who are able to do that, we thank you in advance for it. We will close this in, I would say, 2 weeks. We will close the form, and we will be able to put on each one of our Facebook pages what that result is. And once a report is generated on Diana's end, we can also make sure that each of us is sharing this out to the community. And so, again, thank you for joining in on this very important discussion. Also, just to plug in, this Saturday, there is another pop-up also in Rockaway happening at Red Fern as well at 10 a.m. And I'll put that out on Facebook. Also, we have the farm stand with the Rockaway Youth Task Force. We have this amazing new farmers market coming to Laurelton, which I'm so excited about. And then we have ongoing distribution of produce from Pastor Cockfield at Battalion Pentecostal in Rockaway as well. And now we all have Quinn's email, and we are going to leverage that email and leverage his interest in this discussion to help him be an ally to our community, because we need people inside these agencies to really understand what's happening. And, you know, again, thankfully, we have someone like Frank in our community right here in our backyard that advocates for us each day. So thank you again, Frank. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to the panelists to say some final words so we can close out. Thank you. So we'll go with Milan first. Milan, you.
Yeah, unmuted myself. Thank you, Sylvina. Thank you, Frank, for having me. I'm really excited that this conversation took place. It's super vital that we continue to have such conversations and to keep building power, keep building as a people, because we know how important food is. Also stop by the farm stand, everyone, shameless plug, every Saturday from 10 a.m. to 3. This Saturday, we're actually giving tours of the farm. Get to meet some of our chickens, get to meet our awesome young people that that manage the space. So it should be a fun weekend, a socially distanced fun weekend.
Well, I want to take this opportunity again to say thank you, Silvina, and also to Frank for really opening up this awareness. Many times we talk about these things always in a vacuum, and then nothing happens. And sometimes, especially someone like me who has been doing this for over 30 years, you get despondent. But I'm really excited that at least we are doing something, not only on the local level, but also, you know, where we have the city involved to do something that would help to make our vision become a reality. I know we will see many more people that are in the same line that will jump on board because they know that food is important and we need to have healthy food and not just talk about it. Many times we hear about organic, but really and truly, lots of what we eat is not organic, even though we pay organic prices. I'm not yet in the place where I feel I'm big enough to go out there and ask for a dollar or two for the vegetables and the fruits that I provide. I'm still blessing the community. When I get something much bigger, of course, then I will be looking to do something else with my total vision being a part of what we are doing here in the Rockaways. So thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much. Next, we'll hear from Diana, and then Quinn, and then Frank will close us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. This was a great, great panel and opportunity to, you know, connect with our community and leaders in the space of food justice and food security. And I just want to admonish everyone that's watching that this topic about food access and food justice isn't only about a human right that we have to good quality and fresh produce, but it's also an opportunity for you to reconnect with nature. I think a lot of the times there's such a disconnect between where our food comes from, how our food is grown, and what we are consuming, that sometimes, you know, we can only fathom the fact that we get our food from a supermarket and that we think maybe that's where it's from. So I just want to admonish everyone, following the sentiments of Pastor Cockfield, know where your food is coming from. Get your hands back into the soil. You know, if you don't have land space, which is a total issue in a separate conversation panel discussion, Pastor Cockfield, but if you don't have that access to land space, you can do a windowsill garden. And as Milan said, understanding that a seed is what's planted and that produces the harvest, there's something beautiful about that. And that gives you all the passion and all the ignition that you really need, that we're gonna need to use to fight this issue of food injustice and food insecurity. So I am so blessed to be here, and I'm gonna leave you with this quick photo to show you why everyone on this panel is so passionate about what we're doing. This is a photo of produce from my local supermarket. This is a photo. This is what they are serving. And we have become so desensitized to the fact that this is what is being offered, that we buy it. No more of that. So this all starts again from getting reconnected back to nature, understanding where your food is coming from, who's growing your food, and building that relationship. And that is the beginning of true food justice.
Thank you, Diana. I just wanted to thank you for inviting me into this space, and please use me as a resource in the future.
Awesome. Thank you so very much, everyone, to our distinguished panelists, to all of our attendees on Zoom and Facebook Live, particularly those who stayed with us for this entire hour and some change. We really appreciate it. I want to just say, you know, food insecurity is a major issue in communities of color, in Black communities particularly. We need to continue to work together like all of our leaders here. There are other issues as well. Like I said, our agency, the Commission on Human Rights, put a report out after doing some focus groups, and we put a report out based on the findings, and food insecurity was one of the issues. Housing was one of the issues. Childcare was one of the issues. Transportation was some of the issues as well. So I'm sure that there will be other topics that we work collaboratively on to discuss, to see how can we work with government, local government, to combat the disparities that we see in all areas. But I'm so happy that we're able to have this discussion on food disparities today. I hope it was enriching to you. I hope you learned something, and please keep our feet to the fire as we keep Quinn's feet to the fire as well, so we can ensure that we are serving you. I want to just say a special shout out to our co-sponsors with whom it would not be able to be accomplished today. So we have the NAACP, we have the Friends of Brookville Park, we have the Volunteers of Springfield Park, we have the Community Church of the Nazarene in Far Rockaway, we have Allen NP&D, we have the Federated Blocks of Laurelton, we have Ocean Bay Community Development Center, Development Corporation rather, we have the Rockaway Youth Task Force, and we also have Battalion Pentecostal Assembly Incorporated. I want to give a special shout out to our panelists. Pastor David Cockfield, who is the senior pastor of Battalion Pentecostal Assembly. Diana Rose, who is the CEO and founder of Jars of Delight. Quinn Caruthas Moreno, who is with the Office of the COVID-19 Food Czar. Milan Taylor, who's the founder and executive director of Rockaway Youth Task Force. Notice when I mentioned so many of our community leaders, founder, CEO, executive director, this is what we do. Senior pastor, we are leaders by our very nature, and we're serving the community as we lead because we're servant leaders. I want to also give a special shout out to Chantel Johnson for all of the logistical support given today. Without you, all of this would not have been possible. And to my wonderful, wonderful co-organizer and friend, a community leader, and someone that I truly admire, Sylvina Brooks Powers. Thank you so very much. It was a pleasure working with you. This was amazing. This was fantastic. And I cannot wait to see what's next. Be on the lookout to Southeast Queens and the broader community. We want to ensure that we're bringing these topics to you and making sure that leaders and officials who can answer the questions are here so that we have a direct connection right now. Thank you once again, and I hope you all have a very, very great evening.
Thank you, everyone.